Mark had lived on that quiet stretch of land for years, and most days felt the same. The mornings began with the sound of wind moving across dry grass, the soft cries of birds perched on fence posts, and the distant echo of cattle moving near the far end of the ranch. Life was steady, calm, and predictable. Mark had grown used to silence and long days of work. He did not mind it. But sometimes, in the evenings, when the sun dipped behind the low hills, he felt a small emptiness rise in his chest. He never said it out loud, but he knew he was lonely. One evening, as he finished checking the eastern fence line, he spotted something unexpected near the riverbank. At first, he thought it was a stray animal, or maybe a traveler resting by the water. But as he moved closer, he noticed a figure sitting alone on a large flat stone. Her shoulders slumped, her head lowered. It was unusual to see anyone out here, especially at this hour. Mark slowed his horse and studied the stranger from a distance. She was an Apache woman, young but carrying herself with a heaviness that suggested she had lived through more sorrow than many people twice her age. Mark hesitated for a moment. Encounters like this could be delicate. He did not know who she was, where she came from, or whether she was in danger. Still, he felt a pull to approach her. Something about the way her hands rested motionless on her lap made him concerned. He urged his horse forward. As soon as she heard the footsteps pressing into the ground, she turned her head slightly. Her eyes were tired, almost empty, yet there was a soft strength behind them. She did not move away or show fear. Instead, she seemed resigned, as though she no longer had the energy to react strongly to anything. Mark stopped a few feet away, keeping a respectful distance. "Evelyn," he said gently. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that carried no threat. The woman looked at him for a long moment before she nodded slightly. "Evening," she whispered back. Her voice was thin and low, as if she had not spoken to anyone for days. "You all right?" Mark asked. It was a simple question, but he meant it sincerely. She shook her head, very slowly. "No," she said, "but I am trying to rest before moving again." Mark could see she was exhausted. Her clothes were worn from travel, her hair tangled from wind, and her feet bare and scratched. He could tell she had been walking a long distance. He climbed off his horse and approached carefully. "You look like you could use water," he said. She nodded again, and he handed her a small canteen. She drank slowly, each sip showing how thirsty she truly was. When she finished, she handed it back politely. "Thank you," she said. "I did not expect kindness today." Mark took a seat on a fallen log nearby. Not too close, but close enough that she knew he was willing to talk if she needed. "Name's Mark," he said. "I live just a short ride from here." She hesitated and then answered softly. "My name is Nalin." Mark gave a small nod, letting the silence hang for a moment. The river flowed gently behind her, reflecting the last light of the setting sun. Dust floated in the air like soft golden threads. Despite the peaceful scenery, he could feel how troubled she was. Her posture, her tone, the faint tremble in her hands, all of it hinted at a long journey filled with hardship. "Where you headed?" Mark asked with care. He didn't want to pry, but he also didn't want to leave her alone if she needed help. "I don't know," she answered. "I was with my people, but they no longer want me." Her words came slowly, each one heavy, like they were difficult to admit. "I have been alone for many days." Mark felt a quiet ache stir inside him. He wasn't sure what had happened to her, but her voice carried a mix of sadness and shame. Clearly, her story was painful. He felt no judgment toward her. He only felt a growing worry. He stood and motioned toward his horse. "If you want, you can come to my ranch for the night." Nalin looked at him as though she didn't believe his offer was real. Her eyes widened slightly, showing a spark of surprise. "You would let me stay?" she asked in a fragile voice. "It's just one night," Mark replied kindly. "No trouble." For a long moment she didn't move, then finally she rose to her feet. She walked slowly toward him, as though afraid he might change his mind. Mark helped her onto the horse and then climbed up behind her, giving her space so she didn't feel crowded. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. She stared out at the open land, sometimes blinking back tears when she thought he wasn't looking. When they arrived, Mark helped her down and guided her inside his small wooden cabin. It wasn't fancy, just a simple table, a bed, and a fireplace, but it was warm and safe. He lit a lamp and set out some leftover stew from earlier. Nalin ate quietly, carefully, as though she wasn't used to eating beside someone. After dinner, she sat near the fire, warming her hands. Her face looked calmer, but the sadness still lingered in her eyes. Mark leaned against the doorway, unsure if he should ask more questions. Something in her expression made him think she had been holding back a great deal of pain. After a while, she took a deep breath. "I know you don't want to hear about my troubles," she said softly. "But I left my people because they said I was not useful. They said I brought no good to them." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "No one wants me anywhere. Everyone turns me away." Mark stepped closer, choosing his words carefully. "People can be cruel when they don't understand someone." He paused. "That doesn't mean you don't matter." Nalin looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with emotion. She seemed touched by his kindness, as though she wasn't used to hearing such gentle words. A long silence filled the room. Then, in a moment that surprised even her, Nalin whispered the words that had been buried deep in her heart. "No one wants me. I need a husband." Mark froze, unsure how to respond. Her voice wasn't bold or forward. It was broken, full of fear and longing. She wasn't asking him for anything directly. She was simply expressing how lost she felt, how much she wished for stability, respect, and a place where she could belong. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, as though she had said something wrong. "I didn't mean. I only meant that I wish someone wanted me. Someone who could let me stay. Someone who could help me build a life." Mark's heart tightened. He didn't know her story fully yet, but it was clear she wasn't trying to rush anything or make a demand. Her words came from desperation, from the exhaustion of facing the world alone. He didn't speak for a long moment. Instead, he pulled out a blanket and handed it to her. "You should rest," he said gently. "We can talk more in the morning. You're safe here tonight." She held the blanket close, nodding. Her eyes looked softer now, less afraid. "Thank you," she whispered, "just for listening." As Mark prepared a small sleeping space for her near the fire, he couldn't stop thinking about those final words she had spoken. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing clearly: this woman had come into his life unexpectedly, carrying a story that was painful, complicated, and full of unanswered questions. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something shift in the quiet of his lonely home. Someone needed help, and fate had brought her to his door. Nalin woke up before the sun rose, her eyes blinking slowly as the warm glow from the fireplace faded into the soft gray light of dawn. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds inside the cabin. Mark was already outside, tending to the animals. She could hear the soft clink of metal from the barn and the low grumble of the cattle waking up. For the first time in days, she did not feel fear when opening her eyes. The cabin might have been small and simple, but it felt safe. She sat up, holding the blanket close around her shoulders. Her body still felt weak from walking so far alone, but the warmth, the food, and the roof above her head had given her strength she didn't realize she was losing. After a few minutes, she stood and took a slow walk around the cabin, touching nothing but looking at everything. She wondered if she would ever have a place like this, something steady, something that did not disappear when others grew tired of her presence. After a while, Mark came back inside, brushing dirt off his hands. "Morning," he said with a small smile. "Good morning," Nalin replied, her voice soft. "You sleep all right?" "Yes," she said. "It has been a long time since I slept without worry." Mark nodded, understanding that her words carried deeper meaning than she showed. He grabbed a pan and started heating up some breakfast. As the smell of warm food filled the air, Nalin sat quietly, unsure whether she should offer help or stay out of the way. She still feared doing something wrong, something that might make him regret helping her. Mark noticed her hesitation and said gently, "You don't have to sit alone. If you want, you can help me mix the dough for biscuits." Her eyes brightened just a little, and she nodded quickly. She joined him at the small table and watched as he showed her how to mix the ingredients. Her hands moved slowly and carefully, following his instructions. She wasn't perfect, but she was focused, trying her best. "You're doing fine," Mark said, when she frowned at the uneven shapes she made. Nalin looked up at him, surprised he didn't sound irritated. She gave a small, shy smile. "Thank you for showing me," she said. When breakfast was done, they ate together quietly. The warmth of the cabin, the crackle of the fire, and the kindness in Mark's voice made her feel something she had not felt in a long time accepted. After eating, Nalin finally gathered the courage to speak about the past she had been holding inside. She placed her hands together, steadying herself. "Mark, you asked yesterday why I was alone," she began. "I did not tell you everything." Mark gave her his full attention. He didn't rush her. He simply waited. "My people," she said slowly. "They saw me as someone who brought trouble. I could not keep up with the hard tasks. I tried, but my body was weak when others were strong. I made mistakes. Many mistakes. They said I slowed them down, that I brought no good fortune." Mark's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger toward her, but toward the unfairness of her situation. She continued, tears gathering in her eyes, but not falling yet. "They told me to leave. They said I would find no husband among them. They believed no man would take someone like me, someone who had nothing to offer but hope." "What kind of hope?" Mark asked softly. "The hope of living peacefully," she whispered. "The hope of having someone who did not turn me away. I only wanted a home." Mark felt a tightness in his chest. She was not asking for wealth or admiration. She simply wanted a place where she was not rejected. She took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. "When I left, I walked for many days. I tried to reach nearby settlements, but the people there looked at me with distrust. Some told me to keep walking. Others pretended I was invisible. And every time, the same thought returned to me. No one wants me." Her voice shook, but she continued bravely. "It hurts when the world treats you like you are nothing." Mark lowered his gaze, feeling a pull of sympathy he hadn't felt in years. "You're not nothing," he said firmly. Nalin looked at him with a fragile expression, unsure if she deserved his kindness. Later that day, Mark had to ride into town to buy a few supplies. He asked if she wanted to come with him or rest at the cabin. To his surprise, she stood up and said, "I will go with you. I don't want to be left alone again." He nodded and saddled his horse. He helped her up gently, making sure she was comfortable before climbing on behind her. The ride toward town was quiet, but peaceful. When they arrived, people immediately noticed her. Some whispered. Some narrowed their eyes. Others stared openly, not even trying to hide their judgment. Nalin's shoulders tensed. Her hands, resting in front of her, trembled. She kept her eyes low. Mark noticed the way she shrank under their stares. Without hesitation, he moved closer and walked beside her, in a protective manner. Anyone watching could see she wasn't alone. Inside the general store, the owner's eyes lingered on Nalin before he asked, "Everything all right, Mark?" "Everything's fine," Mark answered calmly. "We're just getting some food and supplies." The owner nodded, though his expression made it clear he wasn't used to seeing someone like Nalin inside his store. She noticed it but stayed quiet, not wanting to cause trouble for Mark. As they gathered items, a couple of townsfolk whispered nearby. Their voices were low, but not low enough. "Why's he walking around with her? Probably trouble. These things never end well." Nalin felt the sting of those words like a cold wind against her skin. She wanted to disappear, to run, to spare Mark from embarrassment. She didn't understand why he wasn't bothered by their whispers. When they left the store and reached the horses, she finally spoke, her voice shaking. "I am making things hard for you. People are talking because of me." Mark placed the supplies in the saddlebag and turned to her. "I don't care what they say," he said simply. "You're under my care right now. No one here gets to decide how I treat someone." Road. Road. Mark. His words were gentle but strong, and they made Nalin's eyes fill with tears she tried to hide. She looked away, embarrassed by her emotions. They returned to the ranch as the sky began to darken. Nalin felt lighter, though a part of her still carried fear. She sat near the fire again, her hands warming slowly. After a quiet moment, she spoke with trembling honesty. "Mark, I know it is foolish, but I keep thinking, if someone gave me one more chance, I could prove myself. I could work, learn, help, and build a life. I want a home. I want someone who doesn't leave me." Her voice grew small, barely above a whisper. "Please, I just want one last chance in life." Mark didn't know what to say at first. Her words reached deep into him, touching a part of his heart he had kept closed for years. He saw her not as a burden, but as someone who had been hurt too many times. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "You don't have to run anymore." Nalin lowered her head as relief washed over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she believed it might not be as dark as she once feared. The next morning, the sky was bright and clear, and a soft breeze moved across the open land. Mark stepped outside early to begin his chores, but when he turned toward the small shed near the cabin, he stopped in surprise. Nalin was already there, carefully gathering small branches and pieces of wood. She moved slowly, but her steps had purpose. It was clear that she wanted to help. Mark walked toward her. "You're up early," he said in a gentle tone. She looked at him with a shy smile. "I wanted to do something before you started working," she replied. "You helped me, so I want to help too." He nodded, impressed by her determination. She had no reason to work. He had not asked anything from her, yet she wanted to prove she was not a burden, and that simple desire made Mark feel something warm inside. After she piled the wood neatly near the cabin, Mark asked, "Would you like to learn how to check the horses?" Her face brightened with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Yes," she said softly. "I want to learn." Mark led her to the barn. The horses whinnied softly when they saw him. Nalin stepped back at first, a little unsure, but Mark encouraged her. "They won't hurt you," he said. "Just move gently and talk softly." She approached the nearest horse with small steps. The horse lowered its head, curious. Nalin reached out and stroked its neck with hesitant fingers. When the horse didn't pull away, she let out a slow breath of relief. Mark smiled. "See? You're doing fine." Over the next hour, he taught her how to brush the horses and check their hooves. She wasn't perfect, and sometimes she held the brush wrong or missed a spot, but she listened closely. Whenever she made a mistake, she quickly corrected it, showing how much she wanted to learn. At one point, she looked at Mark with a serious expression and said, "Thank you for teaching me." No one took time to teach me things before. You're learning fast, Mark replied. That's what matters. Later in the day, after the morning work was done, Nalin helped prepare lunch. Her cooking wasn't fancy, but it was careful and honest. She moved quietly around the cabin, making sure not to disturb Mark while he repaired a broken chair leg. When she set the food on the table, she seemed nervous again. I tried to make it good, she said softly. I hope it is. Mark took a bite and nodded with approval. It's good, he said. You did well. The moment she heard those words, her shoulders relaxed. She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The simple praise meant more to her than anything she had heard in months. After lunch, the two of them sat outside, watching the fields stretch out into the distance. Birds circled in the sky, and the warm sunlight made everything look peaceful. Nalin hugged her knees close to her chest and asked, "Do you ever feel lonely out here?" Mark hesitated before answering. Sometimes, he admitted. It gets quiet. Too quiet. But I got used to it. Did you ever want someone to stay with you? She asked gently. Mark looked down at his hands. I guess I never thought it would happen, he said. So I tried not to think about it. 39. Ending clue. Fronting clue. Ending clue. Ending clue. Nalin nodded slowly. She understood that feeling well. She glanced at him with careful eyes. I know I cannot replace anyone from your past, she said. But I want to be useful here. I want to make things easier for you, not harder. You're not making anything harder, Mark replied. You're doing more than you think. Hearing that made her eyes soften with emotion. She turned away, so he wouldn't see the small smile forming on her face. As the afternoon went on, they walked around the ranch together. Mark showed her how to check the fences, how to recognize signs of loose wiring, and how to look for animal tracks. Nalin paid close attention, asking small questions here and there. Mark was surprised by how eager she was to understand everything. She wasn't trying to impress him. She just wanted to feel like she belonged. When they reached a large oak tree near the edge of the property, Nalin stopped and placed her hand on its rough bark. This tree feels old, she said. It is, Mark replied. Been here longer than this ranch. I like it, she said quietly. It feels strong, like it has seen many things but still stands. Mark looked at her then, studying the meaning behind her words. She wasn't talking about the tree. She was talking about herself, or at least what she hoped to become. When evening approached, they returned to the cabin. Mark chopped wood while Nalin swept the floor, humming softly under her breath. The cabin felt different now, less empty, less quiet, in a lonely way. It felt lived in, warmed by the presence of two people instead of one. After dinner, they sat near the fireplace again. The flames flickered softly, casting warm orange light across the room. Nalin's eyes reflected the fire as she stared quietly at the floor, deep in thought. Mark, she said suddenly, her voice low but steady. There is something I want to say. He looked up, giving her his full attention. When I told you yesterday that I needed a husband, I was not trying to ask you directly. I know it sounded strange. I only meant that I wished someone would want me. I wished for someone who would let me stay, someone who would not push me away. Her hands trembled slightly as she tightened her grip on the blanket. I know I am not special or strong. I know I cannot do everything perfectly. But I have a heart. I can care deeply. I can be loyal. I can try harder than anyone expects of me. I only wanted a chance. We have not due 3. Mark listened without interrupting. Her words were honest, raw, and filled with the quiet pain of someone who had never been given a real place in the world. I see that, he said gently. You're stronger than you think. She shook her head slowly. I don't know if I am strong, but I want to be. Because someone like you showed me kindness. Mark felt something shift inside him. He had helped people before, But this was different. Nalin wasn't just grateful she was growing, learning, and opening up in ways that touched him deeply. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he said. "You being here, that's enough for now." Her eyes shimmered with emotion. She swallowed hard. "Mark, do you think I could ever truly belong somewhere? Not just rest for a night, but stay? For real? Not with Markete's censor. Not within term. Not within 10. He didn't answer immediately. He wanted to choose his words carefully. Finally, he said, "I think you deserve a place to belong. And if you want, you can stay here as long as you need. No one will turn you away." Nalin's lips parted slightly. Her breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. "Thank you," she whispered. Truly, for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. And Mark, who had grown used to emptiness, felt something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet sense of connection, forming between them. The fire crackled softly, and the night settled gently around the cabin. Neither of them knew what the future held yet, but both felt the beginning of something warm, something steady, something that could grow with time if they let it. The days that followed brought a calm rhythm to the ranch. Nalin woke early each morning, ready to help, and Mark slowly grew used to seeing her around. She swept the cabin, gathered firewood, checked the water buckets, and tried her best with every task Mark gave her. She learned fast because she paid attention, not wanting to disappoint him. And with each day, Mark saw her growing more confident, little by little. But even though life on the ranch was peaceful, the outside world was not. People in town had sharp eyes, sharper tongues, and very little understanding of anyone who did not look or live like them. The whispers about Mark and the Apache woman reached more ears as days passed. Soon the whole town seemed to have an opinion. One morning, Mark needed to ride into town for rope, nails, and medicine for one of the horses. Nalin hesitated when he invited her along. The memory of stares and whispers still hurt her. She twisted her hands nervously and kept her eyes on the ground. "I will come," she said softly, even though fear tugged at her chest. "I want to stand near you." Mark understood what she meant. She didn't want to hide, not anymore. And she didn't want him facing the town alone because of her presence. The ride into town was quiet, but not uncomfortable. She held the saddle lightly, balancing herself carefully. When they reached the main road, people stopped what they were doing to look at them. The stares came instantly cold, judging, unkind. Nalin lowered her gaze, but Mark spoke calmly to her. "Don't worry, I'm right here." Inside the general store, the older shopkeeper glanced at her before forcing a tight smile at Mark. "Morning," he said. "You brought her again?" Mark's voice stayed polite but firm. "She's with me. We need supplies." The shopkeeper nodded but whispered something to the man stocking shelves. The man glanced at Nalin with a mix of fear and suspicion. She felt it like a weight pressing on her chest. She stayed close to Mark, careful not to touch anything, as if a single mistake would give them even more reason to dislike her. When they stepped back outside, two men standing near the horses stepped forward. Their expressions were sharp, their mouths tightened. One crossed his arms and tapped his boot against the dirt. "Mark," the first man said, "we heard you're letting her stay with you." Mark kept his expression neutral. "So what if I am?" "She doesn't belong here," the second man said. "It's not right. Folks are starting to talk." Nalin felt her stomach twist painfully. She wanted to disappear. She knew she was causing trouble without meaning to. Mark stepped slightly in front of her. "She's not bothering anyone," he said calmly. "She's just living her life." "That ain't the point," the first man argued. "People think you're making a mistake. Someone like her." Mark raised his voice just enough to show he had reached his limit. Someone like her is a person. A person I chose to help. The men exchanged looks, frustrated but not brave enough to push the argument further. Eventually, they muttered under their breath and walked away. Nalin felt tears gather in her eyes. She didn't want Mark to get in trouble because of her. When they rode back to the ranch, she was silent the whole way. She didn't look at him. She didn't speak. Her thoughts spun like a storm inside her mind. Back at the cabin, she quietly stepped down from the horse and walked toward the river without saying a word. Mark watched her go, sensing something was wrong. After a moment, he followed her. He found her standing near the water, her hands shaking slightly. She kept her back to him, afraid to show her face. "Nalin," Mark said gently. She took a shaky breath. "You should not protect me like that," she whispered. "They will only get angrier. I don't want to bring problems to your life. They're already angry." Mark replied. "Nothing they say changes what I think." "Rended," Quan marked. "I'm rended. Efter." She turned around slowly, her eyes shining with pain. "But it changes what will happen to you. They don't want me here. They don't want someone like me near you. I don't want to ruin your name." "You aren't ruining anything," Mark said softly. But she shook her head, tears now falling freely. "I heard them. I saw their faces. They hate me. And I don't want them to hate you, because of me." Mark took a careful step closer. "You're not alone anymore. You don't have to run from every harsh word." "I do," she whispered, "because I don't want to stay where I cause trouble." She wiped her face with the back of her trembling hand. "I have lived my whole life being unwanted. I do not want to be unwanted here too." Mark wanted to tell her she was wanted, at least by him, but those words felt heavy, complicated, important. He didn't want to speak them too quickly, or carelessly. He needed her to understand he meant them fully, not just out of sympathy. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You belong here, more than you think." But instead of calming her, his kindness made her cry even harder. She looked down at the ground, feeling the old ache return, an ache that told her she didn't deserve a place, didn't deserve safety, didn't deserve someone standing up for her. That night, long after Mark had fallen asleep, Nalin sat awake near the fire. She stared into the flames and thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the men who confronted Mark, about the whispers, about the uneasy looks, and then she thought about Mark, his calm voice, his quiet strength, his steady support. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "I don't want him to suffer because of me." Before dawn, she made her decision. While the sky was still dark, she quietly wrapped Mark's extra blanket around herself, stepped outside, and began walking away from the ranch. She walked barefoot across the cold ground, leaving no sound behind. She didn't take food. She didn't take water. She didn't take anything that belonged to Mark. She only took herself the one thing she believed caused him trouble. She followed the faint trail toward the edge of the land, moving slowly but with determination. Each step felt heavy, as if her heart was pulling her backwards. But she kept going. She was convinced that leaving was the only way to protect him. When the sun finally began to rise, Mark woke up and immediately noticed the silence in the cabin felt wrong, too empty, too hollow. The blanket was gone. Her place by the fire was cold. "Nalin?" he called out. No answer. He rushed outside, scanning the land. The fields were empty. The yard was quiet. The only sign she had been there at all was the faint trail of footprints leading away. His heart dropped. Without wasting a second, he saddled his horse and started riding in the direction her prints led. All he knew was that she was out there alone, thinking she wasn't wanted when the truth was the opposite. He pushed his horse faster, determined to find her before she disappeared into the hills. He wasn't going to let her leave. Not this time. Mark rode fast, his heart pounding hard with every step his horse took. The early morning light stretched long shadows across the land, and the air carried a cold bite. He kept his eyes on the faint footprints ahead, small, fragile marks in the dirt showing exactly how early she had left. He felt a mix of fear and anger inside him. Not anger at her, but anger that she thought she had to leave it all. He leaned forward on the saddle, pushing his horse faster. "Come on," he whispered urgently. "We have to reach her before she goes too far." Nalin walked ahead with tired steps, her blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She did not look back. She forced herself forward, even though her feet hurt and her heart felt heavier than it had in days. Every few minutes, she wiped her tears with trembling hands. She whispered to herself again and again, "It's better for him. It's better if I go." True. But each time she said it, her chest squeezed painfully, leaving the ranch hurt more than she expected. Mark's kindness had shown her what it felt like to be safe, maybe for the first time in her life. And now she was walking away from it, believing she didn't deserve it, believing he would be happier without her. The morning light grew brighter. When the sun rose higher, she heard the distant thundering of hooves behind her. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Mark's voice carried across the open land, loud and filled with worry. "Nalin, stop." She closed her eyes, her shoulders sinking as tears spilled again. She didn't want him to find her, like this, lost, frightened, running from something she wished she could keep. The horse came to a quick halt beside her. Mark jumped down before the dust settled. He didn't shout. He didn't scold her. He just stepped in front of her and looked at her with a deep concern that shook her heart. "Nalin," he said softly, but breathless from the ride. "Why did you leave?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "You know why," she whispered. "I didn't want people to hurt you because of me. They look at me like I am something wrong. They speak to you like you made a mistake. I don't want you to suffer." Mark stepped closer, his voice steady. "You think I care what they say?" She shook her head weakly. "You should. They are your people. This is your town. And you're here with me," he said. "That makes you my people too." Her lips trembled at his words. She tried to turn away, but Mark gently reached out and held her arm not tightly, just enough so she wouldn't walk off again. "You're not thinking clearly," he said. "You're scared. I get that. But running only hurts both of us." "I don't want to hurt you," she said in a shaky voice. "You're not," he replied. "Leaving hurts me more than anything those men said." She finally lifted her eyes to look at him. His expression was warm, firm, and full of something she had never seen directed at her before: value. Real value. The kind that comes from caring, not pity. "I thought, if I left, you would be at peace," she whispered. Mark shook his head. "Peace? How could I have peace knowing you're out here alone again? Cold. Hungry. Thinking no one wants you? That's not peace, Nalin. That's losing something important." She stared at him, her breath unsteady. "Important? Me?" "Yes," he said softly. "You." The wind moved gently between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Nalin looked down, trying to control her tears, but words slipped out anyway. "I don't understand why you would want me," she said. "I am not like other women. I am not strong. I don't belong anywhere. People look at me like—" "People don't know you," Mark interrupted. "They only see what they want to see. That's their mistake, not yours." She swallowed hard. "But you see more. And I am afraid you will regret it." "If I regretted helping you," Mark said, "I would not be here right now, chasing you across half the land." Nalin gave a soft, broken laugh at that. Not because it was funny, but because it made something inside her loosen something heavy she had been carrying for a long time. Mark stepped closer. "Listen to me. You're not a burden. You're not trouble. You're not someone I want to send away. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You're someone I want to stay. Her breath caught. She stared at him as though she wasn't sure she heard correctly. You want me to stay? I do, he said. But not because you need a place, or because you need a husband, or because you're scared. I want you to stay because you bring something to the ranch. I didn't realize I was missing. What do I bring? She asked in a quiet, fragile voice. Life, he said simply. Warmth. Company. Hope. You make the place feel less empty. Nalan's eyes filled again, but this time the tears weren't from fear. They were from the shock of hearing words she had dreamed of but never believed she deserved. She took a shaky breath. Mark, if I stay, I want to stay with purpose. I want to help, to work, to learn. Not just exist. Not just hide. And you will, he promised. You already have. She nodded slowly. She took her time to think. Really think. For once, the choice before her wasn't about survival or fear. It was about possibility. About something new. Something gentle. Something different from every painful road she had walked before. Finally, she whispered, if you truly want me there, if I am not too much trouble then, yes, I want to stay. Mark let out a quiet breath of relief, one he had been holding since he found her footprints. His eyes softened. Then stay, he said. Stay with me. For as long as you choose. Nalan stepped closer, still unsure if she was dreaming. I never thought anyone would say that to me. Well, Mark said with a faint smile, maybe it's about time someone did. He offered her his hand, not forcing, not pulling, just offering. Nalan looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand gently in his. He helped her onto the horse, climbed up behind her, and began riding back toward the ranch. This time, she leaned slightly against him. Not out of fear, not out of exhaustion, but out of trust. As they rode, the land stretched before them in warm morning light. The ranch waited quietly in the distance. No longer just a place she rested for one night, but a place where she might finally build her life. For both of them, the future felt uncertain but hopeful. When they reached the cabin, Nalan stepped down from the horse and looked around with new eyes. This was the first place in her life that welcomed her back after she tried to leave. Mark watched her, understanding the weight of what she felt. He didn't rush her, didn't overwhelm her. He simply stood beside her, letting her know she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in many years, Nalan felt something powerful grow inside her. Not fear, not worry, not shame. Belonging. It bloomed quietly in her heart, gentle and steady. And as she took her first step back into the cabin, she carried that feeling with her, knowing that this time, she wasn't just passing through. She was home.